If you had approached the highlands of southern Africa in the year 1400, you might first notice the land rising slowly toward the horizon. Granite hills scattered across the landscape like ancient watchtowers. Dry grass moved in waves beneath the wind. From a distance, nothing suggested that one of the most powerful cities in sub-Saharan Africa stood ahead. But as the path climbed between rocky outcrops, signs of human presence began to appear. Cattle tracks cut across the dusty ground. Fields of sorghum and millet spread between clusters of huts. Smoke drifted upward in thin grey ribbons from cooking fires. Travellers moved along the same narrow paths, farmers carrying baskets, herders guiding cattle, traders leading long lines of pack animals. This was the road to Great Zimbabwe. The city did not announce itself suddenly. It revealed itself gradually, like a presence growing stronger with each step forward. Villages became more frequent. The number of people increased. Voices carried across the valley in a dozen different rhythms of speech. The closer you came, the clearer it became that this place was not merely a settlement. It was a centre. Great Zimbabwe stood on a plateau surrounded by rolling hills and granite kopjes, massive rock formations rising from the earth like natural fortresses. The location was not accidental. From these heights, the surrounding valleys could be watched easily. The land was fertile enough for farming, yet elevated enough to remain defensible. But the first true sign of the city's power appeared in stone. Across the slope of the hill, walls began to emerge from the landscape, long curves of carefully stacked granite blocks rising from the earth without mortar. The stones fit together with astonishing precision, each one balanced against the next through skill and patience rather than cement. In the sunlight, the grey granite glowed softly against the red soil of the plateau. These were not the crude defences of a temporary village. They were monuments. Some sections of the wall rose higher than a man on horseback. Others stretched across the hillside in sweeping arcs, guiding movement through narrow entrances and passageways. To travellers arriving for the first time, the structures must have felt almost unreal. Stone architecture of this scale was rare across much of the region. And yet here it stood, solid, silent, enduring. Within the outer areas of the settlement, thousands of people lived and worked. Circular huts made from clay and wooden poles clustered together in organised groups. Each compound formed a small world of its own, families cooking meals over open fires, children moving between houses, elders sitting in the shade while discussing news from the fields. The rhythm of daily life was constant. Women ground grain on smooth stone surfaces, their hands moving with practiced rhythm. Potters shaped clay vessels that would store water, grain, and beer. Blacksmiths worked near small furnaces where iron tools and weapons were forged in the heat of charcoal fires. Cattle were everywhere. They moved slowly through enclosures near the settlements, their presence representing more than food or labour. In this society, cattle were wealth. They marked status, supported ceremonies, and connected families through marriage and alliance. Yet above all this activity, something else dominated the horizon: the hill complex. High above the surrounding settlement, stone walls climbed along the rocky slopes of a granite hill. From below, the structure appeared both natural and deliberate, an extension of the rock itself, shaped by human hands into terraces, passages, and fortified enclosures. This was not simply architecture, it was authority. From that hill, the rulers of Great Zimbabwe watched over the city and the valleys beyond. Messengers moved between compounds. Visitors arrived from distant regions. Traders carried goods from lands far beyond the horizon. By the year 1400, Great Zimbabwe had grown into the political and economic heart of a vast kingdom. And as travellers passed through the stone gateways and into the city itself, they stepped into a world that connected inland Africa to distant coasts, distant markets, and distant cultures. The journey had only just begun. Once inside Great Zimbabwe, the scale of its architecture became impossible to ignore. The city was not built randomly. Its layout followed patterns shaped by both the natural terrain and the authority of those who ruled it. Massive granite walls curved through the landscape, guiding movement between compounds and separating spaces of everyday life from places of greater power. The stones themselves told a story of extraordinary skill. Builders had shaped and stacked thousands of granite blocks without mortar, fitting each piece carefully so the weight of the structure held everything in place. Some walls rose several meters high and stretched for hundreds of feet, forming graceful arcs that followed the contours of the hills. Among these structures, one stood apart, the Great Enclosure. This immense circular complex contained some of the most impressive stonework in the entire city. Its outer wall towered above the surrounding land, thick and smooth, constructed with remarkable precision. Inside, narrow passageways curved between inner walls, creating spaces that were both private and symbolic. Near the centre stood the famous conical tower, an unusual structure built entirely from stone. Its purpose remains uncertain, but many believe it represented authority, prosperity, or the stability of the kingdom itself. Every stone carried meaning. These buildings were not only defensive structures, they expressed hierarchy. Certain areas were reserved for elites, while others housed craftsmen, and farmers, and families who supported the city's life. Above everything rose the hill complex, its terraces climbing along natural granite formations. From this elevated position, the rulers of Great Zimbabwe commanded a view across the entire settlement. The architecture spoke clearly. This was not simply a village, it was the capital of a powerful kingdom. At the centre of Great Zimbabwe's power stood the king. His authority was not displayed through crowns or thrones of gold, but through control of land, cattle, trade, and loyalty. The ruler was seen as both a political leader and a spiritual figure, a mediator between the people and the ancestral spirits believed to guide the kingdom. From the hill complex, the king and his court oversaw the life of the city below. Messengers moved constantly between compounds carrying news, decisions, and instructions. Local leaders from surrounding regions travelled to Great Zimbabwe to offer tribute, often in the form of cattle, grain, or precious goods. These offerings reinforced alliances and confirmed the ruler's position at the centre of a wide network of communities. Wealth flowed through the royal court. Gold mined from nearby regions passed through the kingdom's hands before reaching distant markets along the Indian Ocean coast. Control of these resources strengthened the king's influence and allowed him to reward loyal followers. But power here was not maintained by wealth alone. Reputation mattered just as much. A ruler who protected trade routes, maintained order, and ensured prosperity could unite many groups under his authority. In Great Zimbabwe, leadership depended on balance between strength, generosity, and the trust of the people who lived beneath the stone walls of the city. By the 15th century, when Great Zimbabwe stood at the centre of a vast trading network that stretched far beyond the hills of southern Africa, gold was the kingdom's most valuable resource. Mines scattered across the surrounding regions supplied the metal that merchants carried toward the eastern coast. From there, African traders exchanged it with merchants from distant lands who arrived along the shores of the Indian Ocean. Through these connections, goods from across the world reached Great Zimbabwe. Glass beads from India, fine ceramics from China, textiles from Persia. These objects travelled along long trade routes that linked inland Africa with the bustling port cities of the Swahili coast. Caravans moved slowly across the savannas, guided by experienced traders who knew the rivers, valleys, and seasonal paths that connected the interior to the sea. But inside the city, daily life remained grounded in the rhythms of the land. Farmers worked fields of millet, sorghum, and beans that fed the growing population. Herds of cattle grazed across the surrounding plains, watched carefully by herders who understood their importance to wealth and tradition. Craftsmen shaped iron tools, pottery, and ornaments that supported both practical needs and social status. Markets formed naturally where paths crossed. People exchanged grain, livestock, tools, and handmade goods. News travelled with the traders. Stories from distant regions spread through conversations beneath the shade of trees or beside cooking fires. The city was alive with movement. Workers, travellers, leaders, and families shaping the daily pulse of the kingdom. At its height, Great Zimbabwe may have supported tens of thousands of people across the surrounding settlements and valleys. Its stone walls symbolised stability, but its true strength lay in the networks of trade, leadership, and community that connected the region together. Yet the people living here did not see themselves as part of a legend. They saw fields to harvest, cattle to protect, and alliances to maintain. Children grew, elders passed down stories, and traders prepared for the next long journey. From these daily routines, the power of the kingdom endured, and for a time, Great Zimbabwe stood as one of the most remarkable centres of wealth, culture and influence in all of southern Africa.